Okay, hello. Thank you for coming along. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is Georgie Williams and my pronouns are they, them.
Okay, do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Yep, so I am a specialist in gender identity, particularly gender identity from a transnational perspective. So that means I look at how gender varies in countries and then kind of crossing over those borders as well, how we translate ideas of gender. I have been an academic specialist in this field for several years now, and as a consequence, I started the Slash Queer project, which is an educational platform and podcast which invites people to describe gender and sexuality in their own words in cultures all around the world. And then we put that on a publicly accessible platform. So we've had engagement in 124 countries so far, and we have a team of 7 volunteers.
Cool, cool. So in terms of gender, how would you say that you identify?
So I use the terms non-binary transgender to describe myself. Sometimes I also use the term genderqueer. And for me, what that means is I have never exclusively fitted into the concept of male and female at any one time. Being someone who was assigned female at birth, womanhood was like trying to shove my foot into a shoe that was never going to fit. And I use the term transgender to describe myself because I do not identify with the gender I was assigned at birth.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your transition and how that all went and is going?
So that's a really interesting question because I'm somebody who has socially transitioned. So I use the appropriate pronouns for myself. I didn't want to change my name because the joy of being given a name at birth like Georgie, which is already used to be a boy's name, there's an element of androgyny there. But for me, I'm still very much on the precipice of a medical transition. I know other non-binary people don't always consider it necessary. I'm someone who would like to go on a low dose of testosterone at some point, but there's something I'm navigating, especially as somebody who has chronic illnesses and disabilities to account for. It's always a complex journey. So I'm very far into it on a social level, and I've had a lot of support from the loved ones in my life as a consequence, which has been fantastic. But medical transition is something that's very much on the horizon for me.
Okay. So what does it mean to you to be a visible trans person in the world?
So it's complex. As someone who often passes as a cis woman in many environments, in order to make my life a little bit easier, I struggle sometimes with having my identity as a trans person recognized. Amongst communities where other LGBTQ plus individuals can be found, it's obviously a little bit easier. There's aspects of my identity that are more recognized. And when I do make it visible in the literal sense, so sometimes I have facial hair, sometimes I may dress more androgynously or bind my chest, people within the community are so supportive and encouraging. That said, being visible as a trans person does still come with its risks. And as someone who has gone out before, not necessarily passing as a cisgender woman, there's a number of hurdles to overcome in terms of how you traverse the world. And I think that's very much at the forefront of the trans movement, is making sure that trans people are allowed to navigate the world safely and securely whilst being visible in their identities. So I think it's very much a mixed bag.
Okay. So why did you choose to be visible about being trans?
Because it's wonderful. I once read something, and I wish I could remember where it was from, but there was a character in it who was trans, who basically, and I'm paraphrasing, said, God created me as I am in the same way that they created wheat instead of bread and grapes instead of wine, so they too could partake in the joy of my becoming. And I remember coming across that and thinking, that is what it's about, because I grew up as a person who had never, ever come across the term transgender, and what I had been exposed to, which I guess we would now read as transgender, didn't look like me, didn't seem like me. I came across this organically at a young age as something that was internal within me, and was aware on some level from the age of about 7. And took me a very long time to realize what it meant, to understood what it said about me. And I love the idea that someone could see me on the street or could come across something I had shared on social media, especially a young person, and go, oh, that's my kind of transgender. That's me. That's, the way I'm trying to express myself. Because I think the heterogeneity, the great variation of what it means to be transgender is something that should be celebrated. The fact that we have this whole community and we all have slightly different experiences and want to express ourselves in slightly different ways. And I think that's a joyous thing.
Okay, and I love that quote. I also wish you knew where it was from,
I'll
because
have
I
to
would
find
love
it.
to have been able to have a read of that. Right, so what does Trans Day of Visibility mean to you?
Trans Day of Visibility is about having an opportunity to kind of convene as a community and not only discuss what we want to place at the forefront of the movement, especially those of us that are politically inclined. And I will say as well, there is an impetus on all trans people to be politically minded, which I think at times is very unreasonable. But I like the idea of us having an opportunity to come together as a community and say, all right, how do we want to be more visible in the world? What does that look like? How do we make that safe? And how do we bring some transparency to what it means to be transgender? I think it should be a celebration, and I think it should also be an opportunity for us to reflect and say, okay, how are things going to move forward, and what role do we all have to play in that?
Okay, so I'm going to be slightly mean for the next question.
Love
You're
a
only
good
allowed one thing you answer with this. So if you could only give one piece of advice to an aspiring ally, what would it be?
to have a dialogue. And by that, I mean, it's not about being willing to jump in front of a train of transphobia in order to protect someone. It's about having the door open and saying, you know what? There's things I don't understand, and there's things I'll never understand because of how lived experience works. And having those moments where you leave assumptions at the door and you leave your pride at the door in a way as well, and say, I have to be willing to be wrong sometimes. I think that dialogue where you have a back and forth and you can learn from each other, I think is the most important thing.
Okay, very well considered answer there. I think you've been doing your homework. Right, so last question for you. What do you want to say to all the trans people out there who have yet to find their voice? So maybe they're not out yet, maybe they're kind of early stages with things. What do you want to say to those people coming up behind you?
It's a great question. I think I want to say that it is impossible to fathom the sense of peace you find in yourself when you are given the opportunity to accept yourself as you are. And it feels like navigating, understanding your identity is like a storm that won't clear. And on the other side of it, the things you come to appreciate and love about yourself with the support of the incredible community that we have makes it so worth it. It's being trans is a beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing to realize about yourself as well. It's joyful. There's so much joy on the other side.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a beautiful answer again. And I dare say some of the aspiring allies watching this will also take something from that as well. So thank you very much for coming along and doing the interview for us. And I believe you're on the panel as well later, aren't you?
I am indeed, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation.
Well, I'll be looking forward to that as well then. All right, see you later then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later.